If you like what I do, consider joining my channel or donating to my coffee. Links in the description. It's been 30 hours. Let's finish this game. Guru.
Stop! Oh, there.
Guru.
I understand. All those years caged up in here, why you just want to finally finish this game. Well, let's do this.
A Pac-Man Metroidvania for Pac-Man's 45th anniversary? Nobody saw that coming. Not even Clyde. Come on, Clyde, it's your own f***ing game. So when Shadow Labyrinth was announced, a full-blown MV starring the Yellow Chomper himself, now rebranded with his original name, Puck, I was confused and intrigued. I mean, we've seen Pac-Man reinvented before. Rally racer, party game host, and even that brief stint as a Saturday morning cartoon mascot. But a Metroidvania? That's a whole different power pellet. What's even more confusing and intriguing is that Shadow Labyrinth officially places Pac-Man in the UGSF timeline, the United Galaxy Space Force, a shared sci-fi universe I didn't even know existed. Apparently, Namco's been threading together the plots of games like Galaga, Xevious, Starblade, and Ace Combat 3 for years. And now, Pac-Man's part of that continuity. Cool, I guess? Listen, I love Galaga. It's already one of my favorite games of all time. I don't need a complex narrative telling me why I'm shooting bugs in outer space. Just hand me my double ship formation and watch me cook, boys. Even more confusing and intriguing, months before Shadow Labyrinth dropped, Bandai Namco teased it in a very weird episode of Amazon Prime's animated anthology series Secret Level in an episode called Pac-Man Circle, where our favorite little quarter muncher, now referred to as Puck, is reimagined as a manipulative AI drone guiding a humanoid creature to fight, eat, and evolve in a monstrous alien maze so they can escape. It's far less cartoony and whimsical than I'm used to for the character, and I'll leave it at that. Despite the episode's drastic departure from the franchise's established tone, not much from the episode really carries over to the game. And that's actually a little disappointing. So, what's happening in this game? You're just some kid playing a video game when you're suddenly raptured away into another dimension. You awaken as Swordsman number 8 on a war-torn alien world, guided by the mysterious orb Puck, who makes it very clear you're nothing more than a puppet in his scheme. So yeah, lots of changes here. Calling Shadow Labyrinth an ambitious reimagining for the franchise is an understatement, but I'm down for it. Change can be a good thing, but will all this change make an arcade icon an MV legend?
Combat.
The thing that surprises me the most about Shadow Labyrinth's combat is that it tries to be a Soulsvania, copying the stamina management mechanic that's synonymous with Souls-likes and even doing the whole Estus Flask angle for health recovery. But we'll get into the Estus Flask mechanic in a moment. For the most part, Shadow Labyrinth's stamina system works well. Mismanaging your ESP, that's what the game calls stamina, can quickly get you killed. Outside of the basic 3-hit combo, nearly every move you make, special attacks, dodging, even parrying, consumes ESP. It recovers slowly over time, but if you burn through it completely, you'll overheat. And when that happens, no dodging, no special attacks, nothing. You're stuck, waiting to cool down. This creates a nice layer of tension in combat. Managing your ESP becomes a constant push-pull. Do you press the offense and risk overheating, or hold back just enough to stay safe? If you time things right, you can dodge out of danger after a strong combo. But if you overextend, you'll be left helpless, probably made into a stain on the jungle floor. It's a system we've seen numerous times, and Shadow Labyrinth's take on it is well-tuned and adds meaningful decision-making to every encounter. As for the actions that require ESP, our swordsman has quite a few to choose from, toggled in real time using a skill wheel. Offensively, he can equip a variety of ESP attacks like the Sword Wave and the Grenade, both of which do exactly what you'd expect. I especially like the mechanic that allows you to use the Sword Wave immediately after a 3-hit combo. It drains ESP quickly if you're not careful, but it's a great way to tack on extra damage, both to enemy health and their poise meter. Speaking of which, bosses have a poise meter that builds with every hit. Once it maxes out, They're stunned for a few seconds, giving you a window to go full waka waka on their face. I'm always a fan of mechanics that reward aggression, and this one feels really satisfying. On the defensive side, the swordsman can switch between two skills, a parry and a shield. I didn't use either because I'm a dodge guy, but that doesn't mean I can't still complain about them. For starters, it's weird you can only have one or the other equipped instead of both. But my real gripe, you don't unlock them until 3 or 4 hours into the game. Skills that require finesse, like parrying, should be available much earlier if not immediately so players can actually learn them. Saving them for later just feels like doo-doo. Alright, let's finally talk about the Estus Flask healing. This is going to lead us straight into the biggest issue most players have with Shadow Labyrinth. Especially those coming in blind, not knowing it's a quasi-Soulsvania. And that issue, my friends, is the game's checkpoint system. In Soulsvanias and Souls-likes, it's tradition that your healing flasks replenish at checkpoints. Whether that's a bonfire, a bench, a site of grace, or a confluence, for my Afterimage fans out there. Shadow Labyrinth follows this format, but with a twist. There are 2 kinds of checkpoints, big and little. That's not what the game calls them, but you get it. Big checkpoints fully refill your Estus flasks when you interact with them. Little checkpoints do not. And if you die and respawn at a little checkpoint, you'll only get back whatever number of flasks you had when you first used that checkpoint. You won't get a full refill unless you find, or intentionally respawn at, a big checkpoint. And yeah, this has made a lot of players mad. Just check the mixed Steam reviews. If you die at a boss and your closest respawn is a little checkpoint with 0 healing flasks left, oof, you're stuck. You want a refill? Too bad. Want to talk about terrible boss runbacks? Shadow Labyrinth would have you restart at a big checkpoint a biome away if you wanted to get your healing items back to use against some stupid spider boss that ambushed you. But let me be honest with you, that crappy situation, it happens, but it's not the norm. Most, if not all, major bosses have a big checkpoint right outside their arena, ensuring you have a complete refill of healing items before each attempt. And most of these checkpoint struggles only exist in the early game. I know it's never a great thing to hear, but if you can push through the first 6 hours, this checkpoint fiasco becomes a non-issue. Even more so when you find more healing charges. I think I found my second healing charge 3 or so hours in, and it made a world of difference. Now let me be clear, any complaints about the checkpoint system are 100% valid. I'm not dismissing anyone's frustration, but I do think this issue's been overblown by players who bounced off the game before really getting their footing. Obviously, no game deserves your time, and you can drop out at any time for any reason. But I'm here to say, if this checkpoint system is why you bounced, push through to the 6-hour mark. The issue will become irrelevant for the rest of the game's 30+ hour runtime. Yeah, this game's freaking huge if you didn't know. Alright, let's wrap this section up by talking about bosses. Shadow Labyrinth has a lot of them, and they come in 2 flavors, mini bosses and major bosses. Mini bosses are usually optional and can respawn, making them great for farming materials if you're into that sort of thing. Major bosses, on the other hand, are where the real meat and potatoes are. Both types of bosses' designs are mostly solid, though some of the mini bosses lean a little too generic and goofy. Dark Serious, are you for real with this demon turkey right now? Major bosses are multi-phase fights, and for the most part, they're tough without being unfair. Early to mid-game bosses usually took me a few attempts to figure out, while mid to late game ones often went down on the first try. In-game bosses? Whole different story, especially the final boss. They ran me through the ringer. Thankfully, you've got a powerful ace up your sleeve to help even the odds. The Gaia Mech. The Gaia Mech is essentially your super form, unlocked once you fill a special meter by devouring fallen enemies. When activated, you become a towering, invincible monstrosity. The catch? It's on a timer, and instead of taking damage directly, getting hit reduces the duration you can stay in your mech form. So mindless aggression will still get you punished. The mech doesn't control especially well, and the clunky feel kind of undermines the power fantasy, but in a tight spot, the Gaia Mech can absolutely save your butt. That's it for combat. Shadow Labyrinth swings big with its Soulsvania inspirations, and for the most part, It lands. The ESP system adds satisfying tension, the swordsman's movement is responsive and slick, and the poise meter rewards aggression in a way that feels good. On the downside, the parry and shield are unlocks instead of innate abilities, the checkpoint system is very punishing early on, and the Gaia mech is more clunky than cool. But all things considered, Shadow Labyrinth has a tight, strategic combat system that's more robust than you'd think. It just takes its sweet time getting there.
Abilities. Platforming.
The traversal abilities in Shadow Labyrinth are nothing you haven't seen before. Double jump, air dash, ground pound. Serviceable, familiar, and they get the job done. The swordsman does get one slightly uncommon move with the hook shot, which is very fun to use and becomes essential in some of the game's toughest platforming sections. But the real showstopper? The derails. These magnetized neon blue rails transform your character into puck as you ride them, and they're equal parts thrilling and infuriating. And I used the word showstopper because the controls for these sections are enough to make players put down the controller and stop playing. Oh, derails are fine to navigate in the open world, but once you hit those mazes, the horror. To the game's credit, derails are the standout mechanic, and it's refreshing that the devs let you interact with them almost immediately. Giving players a unique traversal hook early on is always a smart move for Metroidvanias. It helps the game stand out. And I especially like how you have to activate derails by finding a nearby tablet before you can ride them. That small detail adds a light puzzle-solving element to exploration. Every time I spotted a derail, I got excited. I'd obsessively scour the area for the activation tablet just to see what treasures, or pathways, those glowing tracks were hiding. And while all these abilities feel great to use and are incredibly helpful in and outside of battle, aside from the derail, fighting while on rails feels like a punishment, there's a major issue around when you actually get these abilities. Shadow Labyrinth has a serious pacing issue that's likely to turn off all but the most hardcore of hardcore Metroidvania fans. I'm telling you right now, if you're a casual player, this game might not be for you. In no uncertain terms, the map absolutely explodes in the second act, offering a staggering amount of nonlinearity with zero handholding. For context, I finished the game's mostly linear first act in about 6 hours. Then I spent another 6 hours wandering aimlessly with very little to show for it, aside from revealing new biomes on the map. No story progression, no perks, no major boss fights, no new abilities. Now, I was not stuck. I had plenty of places to go. There was just so much to explore, and none of it pointed me in any particular direction. I'll go a bit deeper in that in the exploration section. The point I'm getting at now is this. You may go a long stretch of the game without finding key abilities needed to bypass utility gates. Unless you get lucky and stumble into the right paths, you're gonna run into a lot of dead ends. That's cool for the diehard Metroidvaniaire, but for casual players, it's gonna get frustrating. Something else that might frustrate players is the platforming, but I mean that in a good way. Mostly. Out in the open world, platforming feels pretty dang solid. The swordsman moves at a brisk pace, faster than your average Metroidvania protagonist, and outside of his puck form, he feels responsive and snappy. Each biome has its gimmicks to keep things fresh, and the game isn't shy about throwing tough platforming challenges at you. In fact, I'd say much of Shadow Labyrinth's platforming is really well done, with plenty of segments that will absolutely test your skills, especially with that hook shot. And it's all smartly designed. The devs scattered shortcuts throughout the game that lets you bypass those time-consuming sections once they've been completed. So you're not forced to redo brutal platforming sequences every time you revisit an area. But there's a yang to Shadow Labyrinth's yin, and it comes in the form of these f***ing mazes. I get it. This is a Pac-Man game, so of course we have to have Pac-Man sections. But, dude, this is not the way. Personally, I hate them because I don't like being timed, which I know sounds ironic coming from someone who loves Unsighted, but Unsighted's controls don't feel like ass. You're stuck in puck form during these maze segments, and I cannot articulate the nuclear levels of frustration and anxiety these sections gave me. You have to experience them to truly grasp how awful they are. Puck can only jump in 3 specific arcs, and triggering the right arc can be finicky as hell. Mess up even a single jump, that's the end of your run, baby! There ain't no recovering. Back to the start. It just isn't the kind of thing I want to deal with in a Metroidvania, especially not with shitty controls. The one saving grace is that these mazes are entirely optional. Until they're not. Completing all the mazes outside of the final biome affects the final stretch of the game, but not the actual ending. Mostly, you'll want to tackle them to score rare crafting materials, which I'll talk more about in the next section. And that'll do it for this section. Shadow Labyrinth gives you all the expected traversal tools for the genre and throws in a few spicy extras like the hookshot and the chaotic derails. And while the core movement and platforming feels tight and rewarding, especially in the game's tougher platforming gauntlets, the pacing is brutal. If you don't trip into the right upgrade path early on, you're in for a lot of wandering and a lot of dead ends. And then there's the mazes. Oh God, the mazes. They're stressful, twitchy, and completely at odds with the game's usual flow with their poor controls. Shadow Labyrinth dares to do things differently, sometimes to its benefit, and sometimes to your blood pressure's detriment.
Progression.
Remember when I said Shadow Labyrinth is a quasi-Soulsvania? Its character progression is why. Much like Soulsvanias, you collect stuff from fallen enemies. In this case, it's called aura, and exchange said stuff for levels, products, and services. The major difference in Shadow Labyrinth is that they've greatly simplified the leveling process. Instead of stats and skill trees and builds, you can spend aura on increasing your damage and ESP up to level 10. There are milestone levels that require a material called high-grade material if you want to advance, but that's really the extent of quote-unquote leveling up. You can also increase your HP and DP meters. DP is for your mech, but those are items you find while exploring, not something you can manually level up. As for character builds, you can technically create builds using the game's perk system, which is, you guessed it, just like Rabby Ribby's badge system. Modifiers that affect certain aspects of your character. Give yourself another Estus flask, extend your hookshot, make enemies drop more aura when defeated, stuff like that. And just like other modifier systems, perks come with notches, and you only have so many notches to hold so many perks. And of course, you can increase your notch capacity by finding an item while exploring. You can also find perks while exploring, defeating certain bosses, or by crafting them in a shop. You obtain crafting materials by devouring fallen enemies. It's a cool enough concept that gets old after playing for 30 hours. It's really not that bad, but having to click R3 and watch the devouring animation for the 1 millionth time does get a little tedious. Personally, I didn't really mess with the crafting system. It felt a bit grindy, especially when you're stuck refighting mini-bosses over and over, hoping they finally drop the one material you need, like this is Monster Hunter or something. And I definitely wasn't about to farm materials from those fucking mazes. So I mostly ignored crafting altogether. Thankfully, I was still able to finish Shadow Labyrinth without needing to craft any of the supposedly busted perks. However, this is where Shadow Labyrinth's poor pacing sticks out its ugly head again. If you really want to play with character builds, many of the best perks for experimental builds are locked behind late game materials. So you don't really have the option to mess with builds until super late in the game. It's kind of a bummer. One thing I do regret is not crafting more ESP abilities. There are 6 in total, 5 of which you can craft through NPCs, and I only made 2. The game weirdly takes a Mega Man X approach to upgrading them. Red capsules are hidden throughout the world, but they only activate once you've unlocked or crafted the corresponding ESP ability. I did not know this during my playthrough, so I just assumed these rooms were broken. I had no idea how to activate them until I looked it up. Does the game ever explain this? Not to my knowledge. Maybe a clue or some writing on the capsules would have helped. Anything would have been better than nothing. Shadow Labyrinth also has a few side quests, like the Sparkling Stones game-spanning side quest, some fetch quests, and a cool side quest that involves you chasing down and fighting a boss enemy in random locations. The game keeps track of any quests you're currently on, which is handy because you will go long swaths of time without moving the needle on a lot of them. And I know I missed a ton of side content, given that there was an NPC in the ending I hadn't even met. There's a character who gives out information for a price, so I'm sure I could have found this NPC with her help, but if the cold open didn't make it clear, I was done with this game long before the credits rolled. That's it for progression. Shadow Labyrinth keeps its RPG systems relatively light. Instead of stats and skill trees, it leans on simple stat upgrades and a perk system that lets you fine-tune your character and playstyle with modifiers. It's functional, if not super deep. The crafting system adds a nice layer of customization, but it's too grindy for my taste, especially when the rewards don't really feel mandatory. I beat the game just fine without chasing rare materials. That said, for a game this big, I appreciate that it doesn't drown you in menus and math. Just give me my damage boosts, a few fun modifiers, and let me get back to slicing and chomping aliens.
Exploration.
I mentioned it earlier, but here's your reminder. Shadow Labyrinth is f***ing huge. I'm talking Eterna Noctis and Afterimage levels of gigantic. Unfortunately, it falls more into the Eterna Noctis camp of being too big for no good reason. Shadow Labyrinth's rooms are often needlessly spacious, and every biome is an enormous labyrinth that folds in onto itself, which sure makes thematic sense. Labyrinths and mazes are kind of Pac-Man's whole thing, but just know, fully exploring a single biome can easily take 2+ hours. And that's not even accounting for tough boss fights or platforming segments that'll be a wall for less experienced players. Don't get me wrong, the platforming isn't as brutal as Eterna Noctis, but the same critique applies. Both games could cut their worlds in half and still have more than enough content to satisfy. Bigger isn't always better. Sometimes it's just exhausting. I never even found one of the game's optional biomes. By the 20-hour mark, I was just ready to get this game over with. But then those 4 mazes during the final biome. I don't know, man. There's just something about overly large Metroidvania maps that brings the whole experience down for me. Obviously, this is just my personal take, but I think the perfect Metroidvania should clock in around 8 to 10 hours on a first playthrough. I have trouble going back to Hollow Knight because it's such a big game, and Afterimage, I love it way more than the coveted bug game, but it's tough to jump back into it because it's such a time commitment. I don't know, you all let me know in the comments. How do you feel about big Metroidvanias? For me, the biggest issue with Shadow Labyrinth's exploration is that it just isn't rewarding in the ways I want MVs to be. I like compact, dense experiences with lots to do and discover. Shadow Labyrinth just isn't that. There were long stretches where I didn't find anything meaningful. There are memories and soldier logs that flesh out the lore, but I stopped caring about that a few hours in. It just didn't grab me. So when I finally uncovered a hidden alcove or beat a tough platforming section and my reward was a lore drop, it was like a fart in the face, man. I guess some people like that, but I'm not one of them. And to be clear, there is cool and impactful stuff to find. HP upgrades, sparkling stones, mini bosses, perk capacity boosts, perks themselves, DP increases, red capsules for ESP skills, aura caches, mazes. I guess the issue here is that Shadow Labyrinth has a bad discovery to exploration ratio. There's just so much ground to cover, so many massive biomes and overly spacious areas, and not nearly enough good stuff to uncover. That makes exploration feel kinda empty. You wanna know a game that has a good discovery to exploration ratio? Blast Brigade. That's another big one, but there's like 1 or 2 things to find in every area in that game. An absolutely fantastic discovery to exploration ratio. Now, all of this is obviously just my take. Shadow Labyrinth's exploration might be extremely rewarding for players who love the process of uncovering and filling in giant maps. And the platforming's strong, so maybe that's enough for some of you too. And the combat's not too shabby, so there's always that. There's a lot to like in Shadow Labyrinth, depending on what you value. But for me, someone who values exploration above all else in Metroidvanias, I found the experience lacking. Not because it's empty, but because it's too big, with too little worth discovering relative to its size. If you're planning to play Shadow Labyrinth, here's my advice. Take your time. Unless it totally hooks you, don't rush it. I finished the game in 4 sessions, and by the end, I was sprinting toward the credits. I skipped tons of optional content and side quests simply because I was ready to move on. Would I have enjoyed the game more if I'd paced myself? Probably. So if you decide to take the plunge, don't be like me. Play it at your own pace. Let it breathe. You might end up appreciating it more than I did. Now, one thing the game absolutely deserves credit for is how non-linear it becomes after the first act. Once you're past that opening stretch, it really takes the reins off and lets you loose on its massive world. That freedom can feel a little intimidating at first, especially given the sheer size of the map, but the excellent in-game navigation tools help take the edge off. The map is highly detailed, automatically marking key environmental points of interest like breakable surfaces and derails, as well as collectibles, while still holding back just enough to encourage you to use custom markers for suspicious areas. It strikes a really nice balance between guidance and discovery. Fast travel, thankfully, is also handled well. Being able to jump between big checkpoints is absolutely essential in a world this sprawling, and the system makes it easy by allowing you to actually see the map as you make your selection. I'm not certain why some MVs don't let you do that, but I wouldn't mind this being a standard feature for all MVs moving forward, devs. Please and thank you. The game's fast travel isn't perfect. It would have been nice to travel to the little checkpoints too, but it's not a deal breaker. That'll do it for exploration. Shadow Labyrinth nails some of the fundamentals, especially freedom and navigation. But for a game with so much surface area, I just wish its exploration had more actual payoff. More to discover, more cool stuff to find and do. If you're the kind of player who loves uncovering every inch of a massive world, you might get more out of it than I did. But if you prefer your Metroidvanias tight, snappy, and dense, Shadow Labyrinth might wear out its welcome long before the credits roll.
Atmosphere, narrative.
Shadow Labyrinth aims for a haunting sci-fi horror vibe, and for the most part, it delivers. The atmosphere really comes through in the environments and audio cues, at least when it's not blasting iconic Pac-Man noises. Biomes run the gamut from dystopian ruins overtaken by nature to alien ships and fortresses filled with giant, moving mechanical parts in the background. Overall, I found biomes pretty creative and visually interesting, especially standouts like the Crystalline Palace and the Tomb of Forgotten Soldiers. My main issue is that most of these areas are just too dang big. They lose their mystique halfway through. Also, that weird blurred background effect they use to simulate distance, I get why it's there, but man, it just looks kind of ugly. The character designs are pretty interesting. The game leans unexpectedly hard into the Amazonian anime girl aesthetic. Every female character towers over the swordsman. Visually, all the characters have that paper doll look we've seen in games like Ender Lilies. I'm into that style, but I wouldn't blame anyone for calling it a Vanillaware knockoff. Honestly, that comparison feels fair, mainly because the animations just aren't on the same level. As for the game's tone, it takes itself comically seriously. With all its sci-fi jargon, parasitic ghosts, warring factions, and Puck's whole inferiority complex arc. But then you've got little anime girl characters like Ann Pulane and Gumi dropping actual comic relief. So yeah, the game does have emotional layers, and it's clearly trying to take you on a journey. But that journey gets completely undermined by how freaking big this game is. You can go for hours without hitting a single story beat. So by the time the plot kicked back in, I'd usually have forgotten what was even going on. I wish I could comment on the game's soundtrack, but I honestly turned the music down and listened to YouTube videos and podcasts instead. It was the only way I could make it to the end of this game, man. I remember the music being serviceable. The mazes had rhythm-heavy, arcadey bleeps and bloops synonymous with Pac-Man, and that was kind of cool, but not cool enough to make these sections playable. I swear, nothing has made me happier in a video game than when I learned that these mazes were optional. Until they weren't. Narratively, Shadow Labyrinth goes hard on the technobabble, lore logs, and cryptic sci-fi naming, loaded with nonsensical proper nouns and UGSF references that probably mean something to someone, just not me. That said, the core story is easy enough to follow, even if you don't feel like piecing together all the lore logs. And with only a single ending, you don't have to stress about missing anything that might affect the outcome. That's it for this section. Shadow Labyrinth nails its vibe on a surface level. Cool locations, creepy audio cues when appropriate, towering anime ladies, but it all kind of buckles under the weight of its own ambition. There's clearly a strong artistic vision here, but that vision gets stretched thin across a world that's just way too massive for its own good. The mood is there, the lore is there, the presentation wants to be impactful, but like a whisper in a cavern, it echoes for so long you forget what was even said in the first place.
Final thoughts and score.
Shadow Labyrinth is a weird animal. It swings hard for the Soulsvania niche with punishing stamina management and tight strategic combat that rewards aggression. The traversal abilities, especially the hookshot and those neon derails, add some spice, though the infamous mazes will make your blood pressure spike. The RPG progression is simple but functional, and the crafting system adds some optional depth, if you don't mind the grind. Exploration is massive, but feels bloated and empty more often than not, which will definitely divide players. And the atmosphere? It nails sci-fi horror on a surface level, but the story and world get buried beneath the weight of its sheer size. I award Shadow Labyrinth a 7 out of 10. Shadow Labyrinth is available on PC, Switch 1 and 2, PlayStation 5, and Xbox X and S. It took me 25 hours to complete the game, but I missed a lot of content, so it's fair to say this game is easily over 30 hours if you're going for 100%. I played the game exclusively on the Steam Deck with 0 issues, and therefore give it a Steam Deck rating of verified.
Pair placement.
Shadow Labyrinth's such a tough Metroidvania to recommend. I genuinely had fun with it, but it has major pacing issues, taking about 6 hours to really get started and 10 or so more to start getting good. Moreover, it overstayed its welcome, and it nearly broke me when it forced me to do 4 mazes when I was so close to the finish line. It has good combat, even if the hitboxes are a little iffy sometimes, and really good platforming. It's an all-around decent MV, but so much of it feels like padding. And the early game's needlessly punishing with its strange checkpoint system and refusal to recharge healing items. But man, if you like exploring for exploring's sake and revel in not having your hand held, this is not a terrible game. Shadow Labyrinth awkwardly hops off the derail and into the B tier. If you prefer tight, snappy, and rewarding Metroidvania experiences that respect your time, Shadow Labyrinth might wear you out long before the final boss can. But if you're the kind of player who loves giant, sprawling Metroidvanias with a lot of area to cover, like the Mobius Machine or Cathedral, and you can handle some rough patches like the checkpoint quirks and mazes, Shadow Labyrinth might be a game you wanna puck with.